Hi everyone, my name is Matt and welcome to my channel. Normally I paint really bright and clean models, but we've had some requests for some darker and grittier color schemes. Today I'm painting a weathered and rusty Chaos Warrior, so let's grab our brushes and get started. After assembling the model, I undercoated it with gray primer. You could use any color primer for this guide, since all the base colors are opaque. After priming the model, I attached it to corks for easier handling. I began by base coating the steel areas with Iron Hand steel. This model has a lot of steel on it, and you could use an airbrush for this step if you like. I'm not too worried about the silver paint getting on the other sections, since I'll be base coating those with opaque paint later. After the first layer dried, I painted a second for an even finish. Next I painted the shield icon with Runelord brass, and after the first layer dried, I painted a second. I painted all the leather areas next with Dryad bark. Then I painted the cape and weapon handle with gray number 2 from my custom grayscale, and you can learn how to mix your own set in this video here. If you don't feel like mixing anything, Eshin Gray is a close match. I base coated the fur with Steel Legion Drab, and after the first layer dried, I painted a second for an even finish. If you'd like a more in-depth guide to painting fur, check out this video here. Next I base coated the horns with Zandri dust. Then I painted the stone on the belt with gray number 4 from my custom grayscale, and if you don't feel like mixing anything, Dawnstone is a close match. Now it's time for a dark shade. This is a mix I affectionately call Armor Wash, and it's an equal parts mix of Ratling Grime, Contrast Medium, and Lahmian Medium. Treat this paint just like any other wash or contrast paint. Work on one section at a time, and apply plenty of paint so it flows into all the recesses. Then use the brush to soak up any excess paint. Pay special attention to areas like the bottom of the cloak. Paint will keep flowing downward and it will pool in the recesses. Some pooling is good for creating dark shadows, but too much pooling will take a long time to dry and it can leave drips, tide marks, or other unsightly textures. At this stage you could base the model and call it finished, but I'd like to take it a little further, so let's keep going. The model looks good after that first shade, but I'd like to push the shadows further. I got the armor wash out again, and this time I painted it directly into the recesses, and anywhere else the shadows looked like they were lacking. I'd like to add some weathering and rust to the steel, and my favorite way to do that is with glazes of Mournfang brown. Thin the paint with plenty of water, and with barely any paint on your brush, add some thin layers wherever you'd like to add the rust. Notice how the paint stays put and it doesn't run or flow anywhere. If your paint runs or flows into the recesses, it means you have too much paint on your brush. Keep building up layers until you're happy with the effect. Now is a great time for me to ask you to do those YouTube things that we all love so much. If you're liking the video so far, please give it a like. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any future content. If you really like what I'm doing here and want to support the channel further, please consider Patreon or a YouTube channel membership. We have some perks including a Discord server, printer-friendly PDF files of our new recipe cards, and early access to videos. I decided to push the rust a little further with some bright orange marks. Thin some Fire Dragon with water, and just like with the Mournfang brown layers, there should be barely any paint on the brush, and it should dry almost immediately. I think it's easy to overdo the orange, so add it sparingly. You can always add more later if you want to. Now it's time to add some scratches to the armor with Stormhost Silver. Use a sharp brush and dilute the paint slightly as if you're applying a glaze. I think it's more effective to build up the scratches with semi-transparent layers. That way you get a variety of tones. Some scratches will be softer and more subtle, and some will be sharper and brighter. Vary the placement and direction as well. I think the scratches are what really sells the rust effect. Think about where the armor would be more likely to get damaged and worn, and what areas of the model could use more visual interest. Let's add some oxidation to the brass with some glazes of turquoise paint. Just like the rust on the steel, thin the paint with water and apply transparent glazes to the brass. The paint should dry almost immediately, and it shouldn't run or flow. Build up as many layers as you like. Next I added some scratches with Runelord brass. I took the same approach as the steel. Thin the paint slightly with water, and add some semi-transparent scratches along the edges. With the metals all done, next I highlighted the leather, starting with Dryad bark. Thin the paint with water, and apply it to the model like a glaze. I'd like the leather to have a worn look, so rather than trying to blend the paint, I'm adding some scratches and texture. Next I thinned down some Gorthor brown and I added some more scratch style highlights. I try to look for any textures left by the previous highlight and use those as a starting point for the next marks. I also like to add a few sharp highlights on the edges. Build up a few transparent layers until you're happy with the results. I'd like to add one more highlight to the leather with Baneblade brown. But rather than adding scratches, this time I'm just focusing on the sharp edge highlights, and maybe one or two prominent scratches. I think most of the scratches are light enough already, and I don't want them to stand out too much with further highlights. Next I highlighted the cape. I'd like this to have a worn look as well. I started off by thinning down some gray number 2 with plenty of water. With barely any paint on the brush, I added some random scratches and marks across the cape. If the color looks too strong in some areas, or if you make a mistake, that's okay. We'll be able to tone it down with a black glaze next. Next I painted a glaze of black paint thinned with water. This is serving a few purposes here. I painted some of it in the recesses to deepen the shadows, and I used the glaze to smooth over any areas where the gray paint looks too strong and fix any mistakes. I also added a few black lines above some of the bigger gray scratch marks. That will look like a shadow and it'll make the scratch look deeper. I'd like to add one more highlight to the cape, this time with storm vermin fur, and I painted it on the sharpest edges and folds. I added a few scratches here and there as well, but not too many. Let's add some dirt to the bottom of the cape with thinned Dryad bark. I'm using an old beat up brush for this. The worse condition the brush is in, the better. Thin down the paint with plenty of water, and with barely any paint on the brush, apply some paint with a tapping and stippling kind of brush mark. The goal here is to make a transparent layer, kind of like a glaze, with a random looking pattern and texture. You can build up a couple layers if you want a stronger color. Next I repeated the stippling process with Steel Legion Drab, thinned with water. I painted this over a smaller surface area, closer to the bottom of the cape. Then I used a sharp brush and grabbed some less diluted Steel Legion Drab paint, and I highlighted the bottom edges and folds with a sharp line. I also added a couple scratches here and there. While I had the Steel Legion Drab on my brush, I highlighted the fur on the cape. You could dry brush this step if you want to save time, but even though it takes longer, I prefer this way. Then I highlighted a few strands of the fur with Zandri dust. I also highlighted the claws and the ridges along the horns with Zandri dust. Then I highlighted the ends of the claws and the horns with Bonewhite. Finally, I highlighted the edges of the stone with gray number 4. Followed by a sharp highlight of gray number 6 from my custom gray scale. If you don't feel like mixing anything, Administratum gray is close. I used an old brush to apply a generous layer of wood glue to the base, and then I sprinkled on coarse gravel and fine sand. After the glue dried, I painted the sand with a layer of thinned black paint, followed by a dry brush of Steel Legion Drab, and then Bonewhite. I painted the rocks with Dawnstone, and then shaded them with an equal parts mix of Agrax Earthshade and Nuln Oil. I painted the edge of the base with black, and after that dried, I applied patches of dead static grass with superglue, and then I glued the shield to the model. I'd like to give a big shout out to our supporters here on YouTube and now on Patreon as well. Thank you so much for your support. It really is a huge help. If you want to be like these amazing people and help support what I'm doing here, just click the join button down below or follow the Patreon link on the main channel page. Thank you. This was a fun change of pace for me. I still prefer the bright and clean look on my models, but I think it's important to change it up now and then. You never know when you might learn something new or stumble across an idea for a new project. When was the last time you painted in a different style, and what did you learn? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching, and until next time, happy painting.